Okay, so officially, good morning, good day. Rosh Chodesh, Tishrei. Here we go from Tishrei, from Bereshis into Noach, right? Noach is Lashon Nach. Nach is also Aramaic for Shabbos. We're walking into our real Shabbos, the Hayoim Shekulo Shabbos, the day which is all Shabbos. It should be that way. Hayom Yom, we're singing Hallel today, and we're going to sing in Hallel three phrases, three phrases, Haidul Hashem Kitev, Yomen Yisrael Kilim Haste, Yomen Obeis Aaron Kilim Haste. And the Alter Rebbe tells us that for each of those verses that we sing in Hallel, we repeat Haidul Hashem Kitev. So, for instance, on the second verse, where we say Yomen Yisrael Kilim Haste, we repeat Haidul Adon Kitev Kilim Haste. Well, I'm happy to repeat continually Haidul Hashem Kitev. Thank God, because he's good, and he always does kindness for us, and that should be revealed in front of our eyes. Then we have the verses of Avram Zokon Babi Yomim, right, at the end of Hallel. I'm looking at the end of Hallel. This little paragraph, Avram Zokon Babi Yomim. Avram was old, he came into his days. Hashem Beirach es Avram Bakoil. Hashem blessed Avram Bakoil with everything. And then Zevadya Yishmanein, we appeal to one of the angels whose name is Zevadya. You know, all the angels, they have names, the front part of the name, and then the last part of the name is, in this case, is Yud K, Zeved Yud K, Zevadya. So the angels help, God himself helps, of course, and he sends us angels, and angels in the form of us to bring about salvation. All right. It should be that way. Achshav, now. Lessons in Tanya, we're continuing the subject of how bad comes from good, or how apparent bad comes from good, right? And we've talked about the beginning, we've started the beginning of the process of understanding that when Hashem comes to create, in order to create something which experiences itself as something else, which that is the creation, it says, I'm created being, I popped up from nowhere, I'm a yesh me'ayin. So for that experience to occur, there has to be two things. There has to be diminution of Hashem's all-encompassing light, because if that weren't so, everything just would be all-encompassed, and there would be nothing besides him, which is true, but the experience would be, there would be no us, no creation to have any experience of being ourselves. So number one, he shrinks, diminishes that light, and number two, he covers it over. And with that, he creates the possibility of what we call darkness, what we call the backside, as we will speak as we move into this little piece in the Kuti Amorim, page, bottom of page Kuf Mem, opposite 278. Okay. So we're first going to describe the holy side. And I'm going to introduce here two sayings. One is a pasuk, which are not on the page, to, I think, give some rootedness to this very short, actually, discussion today. Two things. Well, they're actually two pasukim. One says, when it comes to describing the creation of man, it says, Nasa odem betzalmenu kidemusenu. Let us make man in our form and in our image. And there are two words here, tzalmenu ukidemusenu. Tselem. We were made in the Tselem Elokim. We are made in the form of godliness, which means that we have as far away in terms of the two factors of diminution and covering, as far away we may be from that original, way down here in Olam Hazeh, Gashmi, we contain with us the Tselem Elokim, the form of God himself, which we're going to start to discuss this morning. What is that form of God? And this becomes Demus. This becomes the image of who we are. We're created, but Tselem Elokim, in the Tselem is also, it's brought in Hasidus, is the word derived from the word tseil. Tseil means protection. That's one thing. We're protected by Elokim. And tseil also means shadow. And one thing about your shadow, it goes wherever you go. So the image of God, as he is the creator, and even deeper than that, the infinite one himself, goes with us wherever we are. But, as we said, as the Alter Rebbe said in our piece for Friday and Shabbos, that Tselem is diminished in terms of its appearance through the shrinkage of the Ein Sof and then the concealment. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other is from Tillim, Tillim 139, a simple pasuk which says, Acher v'kedem tzatoni, back and front you have created me. So we know there are two sides. That is, from the singularity emerges initially two sides. On the side of Kedusha, that's called Kedem, primordial, Kedem, the east. It's also the east, right? And the east is and Kedem are both metaphors for the depth of Hashem, which precedes his histalshalis, which precedes his coming out into creation. So that's Kedem. And the other is called Acher, as in the Sitra Acher. So the pasuk says, Achra v'kedem tzartoni, you formed me backside, the back of the neck. That's where the Sitra Achra comes from, the backside. And Kedem, the front side, which lines up with the Panemius, Panim. Okay. I hope you got that, and that's not anything here that's written. It's background that I personally think is appropriate, helpful to understand what is written here, which we will now get into. Before I do, any questions on what I said so far? Okay. So we'll start. V'hine nefesh ha'adam, the soul of a person, Yedua l'kol, is known to everybody, right? I don't know that everybody knows what we're about to say, but everybody that in his hemisphere, in his sphere of influence, knows this, as we've learned this. L'kol, shehi kolula meyud spheres. The soul of a person includes 10 spheres. They are Chabad, and he doesn't list them all, but Chabad, Chagas, Nahi, and Malchus, right? Fundamental. Chochmah Bina Das, Chesed Gebur Tiferes Netzach Hod Yesod, that's 9, and Malchus 10. 10 powers of the soul. Now, Va'av Shekulim Meruah Piv Yizborach, even though all of them come, and what he means to emphasize here from a singular point, the breath of his mouth, this is a metaphor we've used quite a bit, the Alter Rebbe, the breath of the mouth, that breath of the mouth informs all the ways in which letters can be articulated. But before they're articulated, they're a simple breath. As it written in the pasuk, "V'yipach be'apoch nishmas chayim." This past week's Chumash, when it comes to creating man, v'yipach be'achav, he blows into his nostrils a soul of life. And Zohar says about this, man de nafach, this is not written here, it's written in other places in Tanya. Man de nafach, when a person blows, the pnim yusoi, from his innerness, he blows. That innerness is singularity, one, before any division in the next, for simple division, after one, is two. And before we get the Sitra Achra and the Sitra Kedusha, we have a singular source. So that itself is kind of amazing to think about, that the Sitra Achra, the negative side, the other side, also is empowered by that simple breath, which is, it's not essence of Hashem, but is deep in the structure of Hashem, if you can call Hashem structured, that before any subdivision. The Sitra Achra also gets that. Remember, our whole discussion here in this letter is understanding what the Baal Shem Tov said, which people took as heresy, that even a non-Jew and even a heathen or idol worshiper is empowered by a spark of God, because it all comes from the mashal that we're talking about right now, the simple breath, the simple oneness that exists before division. So when he created man, and that's why we got our story of Adam and Chava, what Eitz Hadaas Toiv V'Ra. From singularity comes the side of Toiv, which is Kedusha, and the side of Ra, which is the Sitra Achra, the other side. But in origin, it's from one simple breath. He blew into this being, this Adam, a soul of life. The Kol Mokem, back inside. Nevertheless, der Prat, when we look at it individually, singularly, specifically, Chabad Shebenafsho, now we get into the divisions, right? There are 10 ways in which this singular light gets divided. I've mentioned before, and it's mentioned many times in Chassidus, the mashal of a prism, where a singular beam of light comes through the other side through the process of diminishment and concealment into multiple rays. In this case, 10 rays from a singular source. So these 10 rays, he blows a soul, a singularity into us, and this soul manifests itself with Chabad. Those are the first three, Chochmah Bina Das, Shebenafshe, of the soul. And these are parallel to, comparable to, the three first heads in the head of the 10 spheros. So 10 powers of our soul align perfectly with the 10 spheros of creation. Chabad and Chabad. Chabad of us and Chabad of the Yud spheros. Hamachunas b'shem Ava ve'ima, which the first two, Chochmah and Bina, are called father and mother. And then from there flow down the Midos, Hesed Gevura. So he's skipping Das. There's a construct, two general constructs that you see if you look at diagrams of the spheros. The one we're more used to is Chabad, where Das is included. But where Das is not included, then Keser is counted. The way we count generally, we start with Chochmah Bina Das and on down to 10, down to Malchus, which gives us 10. But another configuration is excluding Das and counting Keser, which also gives us 10. And one little factoid to remember and use is that all the middle kavod, Das, Tiferes, Yesod, Malchus, all the middle kavod direct upward to Keser. They're all connected with Keser. So if we don't count it explicitly, we're counting it as it exists in the crown. So we have Chabad, which becomes father and mother. Chachma is the father. The father is the metaphor of giving forth something. And Bina is the reflective and receptive, the mother part, which takes the Chachma in. And that's Abba ve'ima, father and mother in the language of Kabbalah. And then you have the Midos, Ava ve'yira, and they align right, left, and middle also. Ava is on the right. Ava, or Chesed, is a toilda, is an offspring of the right side, which is Chabad, which is Chochmah, which flows, which gives out, and that's Chesed, giving out love to somebody else. And Yira, which is constraint, which is Bina, taking in. All of this is reflected Shebenafshoy in a person's soul. And these 10 spheros, these 10 powers in a person's soul, and Dugma Lamido Shebiyut Spheros, they are comparable and analogous to and mirror the 10 spheros in the cosmic structure. Hanikras b'shem Zah, the 6 midos, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, is called Zeir Anpin, the small faces. The Keser, the externality, the part of Keser that funnels into Chabad is called Arach Anpin, the long face. Long meaning it's big. It's big. It's in a world that's very large, which is Keser, and it gets shrunken. It gets constrained into the lower midos, which are called the small faces. So that's the difference between Arach Anpin and Zah. So Zoh is when it gets constrained into the actual midos. And then the one that's missing, we haven't spoken about yet, is the power of speech. So now he's alluded to another marshal, right? Since we are built in the image of God, so let's look at ourselves for a moment. We have an essence, the etzem neshama, the essence of the neshama, the chelek elokam imal, right? Analogous to the simple breath before it becomes divided, our etzem, we have an etzem, and the etzem then divides into expressions of the etzem, the first being Chabad, and then Chabad comes down and informs the midos, and the midos inform the thought, so we have esekoichos, and midos inform the first of the 3 garments, which are thought, speech, and action. So we can simplifying but accurate. We have the essence manifest in Chabad, and then manifest mind. All right, the very principle of Tanya, Mayach Shalat ala Lev, the brain rules over the heart, informs the heart, and then the heart uses one or more of the 3 garments, which is Machshava, Dibur, and Ma'aseh. So that's why I'm bringing this out, because now he's speaking about Koyach HaDibur, the power of speech, which we haven't spoken about yet. This is the power that relates to the outside world, and relating to the outside world is a function of Malchus. The king and queen exist for their ability to guide the kingdom, which the kingdom is something outside of them. So this is Koyach HaDibur, the power of speech of a person's soul, and that's Dugma L'Dibur Elyon. That's comparable to the supernal speech. Bereshis Bora Elakim, he created with speech, the metaphor of speech. And using the way we're talking about it now, you could say he came outside of himself, or invested his most inner self in something which now has the experience of being external to himself. How did he do that? The way we do it, with speech. We come out of our inside. After all, thought is still inside. The first instance of outside is speech. It goes from inside out. And so that's called Dibur. Dibur, we've learned Dvar Hashem. Remember, we had 3, 4, 5, I don't remember, words for the Shekhinah, one of which is Dvar Hashem, the word of Hashem. So that's when a power of speech comes out of us. That's comparable to the power of creation, of Malchus, which exists in the 10 spheros. Dugma L'Dibur HaElyon, comparable to the supernal speech. Hanikra B'Shem Malchus, which is called God's Malchus, his kingship, his Shekhinah, and his divine presence, Shekhinah. And therefore, V'Shemedaber Divrei Torah. All right. So when we speak words of Torah, right, coming from our mouth now, words of Torah, Me'ora Dibra Elyon, that arouses the supernal speech. The big example we had from this recently is Rosh Hashanah. When we coronate him down below, right, with our Torah, with our Torah and our tefillah, the Sukkim of Malchus, Sukkim of kingship, Sukkim of Zikroinus, remembering him, and with what do we do it with the shofar? That was all the language of the Nusach of Tfilas Musaf, particularly in Rosh Hashanah. We motivate that God should come out of his depth and inwardness and reveal himself in the way that he does with his metaphorical speech. We call that Malchus, Dibur Elyon, the supernal speech. So when we say words of Torah, remember, he himself is invested in the Torah. We learn that from the word Anoichi, from the first of the 10 utterances with which he created, not the 10 fiats of creation, but the 10 memoras of the Torah, right? Memoras. Those 10 utterances come from Anoichi. Anoichi Hashem Elokecha is the first, and you may have learned this before, but Anoichi is an acronym for Ani. I, God is saying, I, my very self, Nafshi, my very self, I, my very self, Kasavis, wrote my very self, wrote myself, the Yahavis, and gave myself into the Torah. So when we read, in the sense of speaking with our mouths, words of Torah, so we're arousing the supernal speech, Dibur Elyon, Liyachad HaShekhinah, which brings unity to the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah up above, the divine presence up above, is united with the divine presence down here below, and the flow of Kedusha, the flow of holiness, is created, an unadulterated flow. And this is one of the, I don't know if you call it a secret, but one of the insights into why it is that words of Torah hold up everything, because God's invested in them, and when we say them, we're bringing that investment of godliness Himself in everything down through all the levels of worlds. The Yachad HaShekhinah, to bring the Shekhinah together. So Shekhinah, when we right, this is all connected with a pasuk that the Rebbe used. I want to say the 6-Day War. I'm pretty sure I'm right. Could be wrong. Could be the Yom Kippur War. Someone could say that he used over and over again the pasuk in Tefillim number 8. That from the mouth of little children is founded our strength. This began the whole psukim, the 10 psukim that everybody says and continues to say, started then, words of Torah. It says, from the mouths of children, Yesadato Oiz, our strength is founded. And Chazal say, Ein Oiz Ela Torah. There's no strength except Torah. So the words of Torah, the words of Tefillah, the words that we are saying that reflect the godliness that's in everything, actually brings down the godliness and the goodliness and everything. That's the power of learning and the power of prayer. Liyachad HaShekhinah, to unite the Shekhinah. And because of that, Kaimalon, it's established for us, meaning in halacha, that in Krishma, when we say Krishma, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and B'Birchas HaMazon, and when we bench after eating, V'divrei Torah, and when we learn Torah, it's established in halacha, La Yaitse, you don't fulfill the halacha of Krishma, benching, or learning Torah. You're not Yaitse, you don't fulfill it, Behira, B'lav Dibra, by just thinking about it without speech. Because our speech, when it's invested in those 3 areas, is bringing down His speech, and His speech is the very force of creation. That's today's Tanya. Short. We're going to then, now tomorrow, this is all about the flow from the side of Kedusha. And tomorrow we'll look at the flow, 100% analogous to this, but on the other side. All right. Comments, questions?
I have a question, or I'm just wondering, Avi, if you could repeat the about the acronym of Anochi and
sure.
Those parts. I didn't get
sure.
it at all.
Well, the first word of the 10 Commandments is Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Yes? Or
yes.
no? Okay. How do you spell Anochi? If not, I'll tell you. Aleph, Nun, Vav, Yud. So write them down, each word letter, Aleph, Nun, Vav, Yud. The Aleph is I. God is saying about Himself. I, Ani, Nafshi, my very self, I, my very self, wrote kasvis, v'ahavis, and give into the Torah. God is saying in that little acronym, I am giving my very self in this Torah. And therefore, when you speak words of Torah and bring words of Torah into the air, you're bringing God himself into the air.
Ah.
Okay?
Yeah, good
That's
one.
that one. Yeah, it's a good one.
Okay.
That's right.
In that, in the same respect, would you repeat the pasuk Tilim and the citation, please?
Which are the ones I said outside? Yeah. Where are we? Okay.
The children's
Oh, that one. Oh, that one. Yes,
voices.
it's good. It's good. Oh, that one. Okay, that's chapter 8 in Tilim. I don't remember the pasuk.
It is? All right, I'm looking. Yes. Okay, Gimel.
Yeah, see it? Gimel? Okay.
Yep.
From the mouth of the ones who are suckling, the suckling ones. Well, Yoinkim is the suckling. Oilalim, the mouths of small children and suckling babes. Yesaduto oyis. Strength is founded. That's the pasuk. And then I brought.
And it's also goes on.
Oh, your voice went out. What? What'd you say?
The end of it is also appropriate.
What's it?
Laman Sorechacha Hashbis Oyev Umin Nakem. It goes on to say you're going to overcome your enemies.
Oh, okay, fine, because you're breaking up a lot. Good. So you're breaking. Okay, it's right.
No, not really.
No,
yeah, I'm not in a good place.
No, you can't. Okay, but we get. Okay, I got the idea. The ois, the strength.
I'm not in a good place to speak.
I got it. So I'll say it for you. That the strength, as it goes on, what is the strength for? To abolish, break up your enemies. And then I just connected with that. The Chazal say about that word strength, ois. You know, the word ois is Uzi. That's not accidental. The name of the rifle, the Uzi, strength. So from the mouths of children and sucklings is the foundation of strength. And Chazal say on the word strength, ein ois ela Torah. There's no strength except the gun of Torah. I'm saying gun because I'm playing with Uzi. But that's that one. Okay?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So how does this relate to what we said last week about saying words of Torah with 10 people, 10 men? Like if all you have, if I think what we're saying today, like if you say words of Torah,
yes,
you're bringing,
Okay, I'll tell you my take on that. First of all, we learned someone I don't remember. I think it was Rosa, put on the Rosa, that it didn't mean just 10 men. It meant 10 people, right? 10 people. And we know there's a power in 10. Jews, yeah. And there's a power in 10. I mean, we just talked about the 10 spheros and the 10 powers, right? And then I brought up in a text that I sent after that, having been challenged by another Mishnah. That Mishnah about Shechina that's in the mouth of 10 is contradicted by another Mishnah, also in Pirkei Avos, which says even 2 people, right? And then that's contradicted by a saying that we understand that even 1 person. Now, Moshe Ganut and I engaged in a conversation through Sarah's help. I don't know if she's on here or not. Moshe Ganut's a friend and a student of Rabbi Ginsburg, and we spoke back and forth. And he brought out something which I hadn't known, that the Tzemach Tzedek speaks about. It's not these can't be contradictions, even though they seem contradictions. 10, 2, and 1, right? Because Elo ve'elo divrei Elokim Chayim, they're all in this. Well, 2 of them are in the same Pirkei Avos, in the same chapter in Pirkei Avos. So the Tzemach Tzedek says, what's two? Two is the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara. That when a person overcomes his second voice, right, which happens to be, according to Tanya, really the first voice. The first voice that we have is the Nefesh Bahamis. That's our animalistic beginning, into which is infused, right? If you remember, chapter 2 in Tanya talks about the Nefesh Elokis. Chapter 1 talks about the Nefesh Bahamis. So the Nefesh Elokis comes in secondary, right? And when one utilizes Nefesh Elokis to overcome the natural attractions of the Nefesh Bahamis, that battle brings out the notion of the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah, remember the whole subject is Shekhinah Shoria. Where does the Shekhinah dwell? And he said, only in a gathering of 10. The Tzemach Tzedek brings out how it can be in 2. And generally amongst Hasidim, and I'm not talking about just us, but in general in Hasidus, even 1. And one of the Pirushim I've heard about that is what we're talking about today. There are 10 koichos, right? So one person has 10 koichos. When you harness all the 10, the Shekhinah can dwell on even 1. Now, that's the explanation of Shekhinah can dwell. Now, why the Alter Rebbe doesn't bring those others, now this is pure conjecture. Pure conjecture, take it or leave it, is because the Alter Rebbe in that letter is pleading with us to act as a kahila, to act as a group. Not one person does this and another. Remember, one person is sitting and learning. 9 people are sitting and learning Ayin Yaakov, the Midrash, and somebody else is in a corner learning his piece of Gemara. He's get together, Jews. Obviously, Israel. We just came from a whole year of Hakel, right? The whole emphasis is on Hakel. That's my take on why the Alter Rebbe doesn't bring those other 2, because he's bringing the Shekhinah resting in a particular context, which is Yidden getting together the way we're getting together now all over the world. And I think in the course of what I said, I answered your question. I'm not sure. Did I?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
It's so amazing now. You started this year talking about good and evil, and now we just ended this year talking about good and evil. And that's what we usually do. We talk about it, and it's kind of vague. Sometimes it's more clear, sometimes it's less clear. It's all kind of mixed up, and we try to unravel it. But right now, it's so clear. Everything
Yes.
is everything is so sharp.
Yes, I just have to. I want to interject.
Yeah.
I think this is an amazing example of what the Rebbe said. Kol haberurim, all the berurim have been done. We are sitting in a time when it is so clear what's good and what's evil. Separate it out.
And you feel like you're on the verge. You feel like every time something good happens, it's so good. You feel like, and it always comes, I guess, historically, it's always that way. It always comes from unexpected places. And a lot of times it comes from people doing amazing tshuva, like Chanel or like, Sleepy Joe all of a sudden wakes up, and just everything. It's so clear, like you feel like you're on the verge, you feel like,
we are on the
world. My goodness, the world is really changing. And everybody's talking about it in a very understandable and real and clear way. Everybody from I don't know if I said it. There was somebody dug up, like during the Yom Kippur War, Shlomo, an interview with Shlomo Carlebach, and he's maybe a controversial figure, but he was a very learned person, and he talks about good and evil. And then another thing, which I may or may not have said, this soldier is talking about good and evil in this way that's very clear, and suddenly, the news people chase him and say, "Hey, say that again." So important.
Well, on
from the top to the bottom.
On that same theme, last night Bela was looking at one of these commentators non-Jewish woman. Yeah, you all know who she was. Probably, I don't know who she is. A non-Jew and another non-Jew, and very famous, well-known commentators taking this side, that it's so clear what's evil and what's good, and it's time for the world to wake up. And they're just speaking as non-Jews. It's so clear, and it's time for the world to wake up and grab the good and get rid of it finally. I mean, and these were non-Jews speaking.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, we know what it's good. We know what we have to grab onto.
Yeah.
What else, guys, before we pack it up for today? At least the Tanya piece, and pack it up and act it out. Right? Pack it up and
good
act
Chodesh,
it out.
Chodesh Tov.
Good Chodesh.
See
you tomorrow.
That reminds me. I don't know if I mentioned it, but I also want anybody that wants to send in names, because for the second day davening, the women's Rosh Chodesh group, at the tel at the Mishkan, which is practically like at the Beit Mikdash, tomorrow morning. So
okay, we will. And before we go, someone else wanted to say something before.
Same here at the Rashbi. Same here at the Rashbi right now.
Beautiful. Okay, bye-bye. Till we meet again.
Bye.
Thank you.